And we sort of said, well, look, if we're ever going to do it, then now surely is the time. And our mindset very much was, if we don't do it, will we regret it later on? And we concluded we probably would or possibly could. And if we do it, what's the worst that can happen? My approach is always trusting, and the same with relationships at work. Trust unless you've got a reason not to. And I think that, yeah, you might get your fingers burnt, you might get hurt, surprised you pay for it. And I've always found that you get an amazing reaction from people. Often people maybe who aren't trusted that often, and it's like, actually, I'm being trusted. So I think trust is a really big thing.
Welcome to the Merseyway Innovation Centre podcast, where we explore the power of unexpected encounters and spontaneous connections. Join us on our journey as we delve into the world of casual collisions, those chance encounters and unexpected conversations that have the power to redirect our paths and shape our destinies. Get ready to explore how a single moment can change everything.
So, welcome to the Merseyway Innovation Centre, and today I am joined by Geoff. Geoff, do you want to introduce yourself so people know who you are?
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I'm Geoff Durbin, and I'm a proud Stockport resident. Business-wise or career-wise, most of my career has been in professional sport. So back in 1986, I joined Manchester City Football Club in the commercial side and progressed through as commercial manager. And then I spent 15 very happy years at Lancashire Cricket Club. I was commercial director there. And then after that, did a few different stints, a bit at Bury, who sadly have had a few problems, and my last sort of main role was at Warrington Wolves. So 3 different shaped balls in that. Married to Nikki for 32 years.
Wow, well
nearly.
done.
Well done for her anyway. And we have 2 grown-up children now. Chris, who's now the area manager, based in, he lives in Cheadle, and Bethany at 26, who we thought had left home, is now back with us. I'm sure a lot of parents of children in their 20s or even 30s can probably understand that, although we love having them with us, of course.
Well, mine are approaching that age, and I'll be asking you after this podcast, what's the...
Well, plenty of advice on that, Rob.
Okay, yeah, some advice would be nice, yeah. So, what do you do then now? What's you've said that your career, you've talked about a little bit about your career there. What do you do now?
Yeah, well, I need to gloss over the career, otherwise all the podcasts will be taken up with that. As you can imagine, there's plenty of stories from the world of sport. But when I left Lancashire in 2015, I was early 50s, and at that stage, the question wasn't, well, what's your next job? The question is, what am I going to do with my life, really? What do we do? You have a real reset, and there was an opportunity to spend a bit of time to do that. One of the things that me and my wife had considered was fostering, and I think that came because she was a TA in the local school in Cheadle Hulme, and was working well and supporting specific children with various needs and challenges. But she would often say, well, if I only could bring them home and do more work with them. And I think that set the thought in our minds. And we sort of said, well, look, if we're ever going to do it, then now surely is the time. And our mindset very much was, if we don't do it, will we regret it later on? And we concluded we probably would or possibly could. And if we do it, what's the worst that can happen? Well, we spend a few months going through the Skills to Fostering course, and if we decide it's not right for us, and it's just, we've done our best and we've tried it. So we embarked upon that. I sort of set up a consultancy so I could still do some work in business at that time, and 40% of foster carers do combine fostering with a job. So it is possible in certain circumstances, particularly if there's 2 of you and one may be working, or depending on what type of work you've got. So it's important to get that message across generally, actually, because a lot of people, I can't foster because I work. Well, no, you can actually. Mm-hmm. Started that, and I was probably the main carer initially for our first placement, because Nikki was still working as a TA. She then left, and I did the Warrington Wolves stint, and so I'd sort of, I'm the kids' school run in the morning, and then Nikki would do other things. And it's just been fantastic, really. I have combined it with other things because it's one of those, I think, when people say, are you retiring? First of all, you think, do they really think you're that old? And secondly, it's just abhorrent, the thought of retiring. I don't think I ever will. But it's a time, I think, to look at non-exec roles. So I started to learn my trade, if you like, as a non-exec at Jigsaw Homes, based over in Ashton. You have to learn how to be a non-exec. It's very different to being a full-time executive on a board, challenging and checking and compliance and various other things. And supporting the exec staff. So if you've ever been on a board where you've got non-execs who who don't prepare for meetings, challenge you when they could have done outside a meeting, or you don't feel supported. There's nothing worse going into a meeting like that, and I always felt I don't want to be like that when I'm a non-exec. So 2 roles with 2 wonderful charities, Together Trust, who are based in Cheadle, who provide care, support and education for mostly young people, children, but adults as well. And then Great Minds Together, who are a newer charity doing some fantastic work in Stockport and well beyond Stockport for children with special educational needs and social and emotional difficulties and challenges, and the families around them. So it's very much a wraparound model, which I think is so important. There's not a holistic view generally out there in social care, but when you talk to families in need, it's usually housing, maybe mental health need for the parent, the child has got specific needs, and where do I go, what do I do? So Great Minds Together do a really good job, and I vice chair that and have helped produce or get a board together because it's a relatively new charity and they needed that governance. So it's bits and bobs, but when you combine them all, probably more busy now than I ever have been in some ways.
I mean, it sounds like it's almost like you worked sort of commercially for quite a few years, and then your currency changed. You kind of had like a
I
don't want income. I want what's my new income going to be?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we all need income, but we were fortunate in a position, in those circumstances where we could look at it and say, well, what do we need to do to live and have a holiday and so on. We've never been particularly financially motivated, which sounds strange for a commercial person, but that's not the most important thing for me. But yes, we're in a fortunate position we could do that. And fostering does provide some income, you get an allowance for the child and you get a payment for your professional fee because it is a professional role. But the non-exec side of things, always appealed to me because I think you need to stretch your brain and you get to a certain stage. And I see it's a privilege, really. It's not many people who've done a completely different sort of career change at that time of life. And it might take me 10 times as long to learn something as I used to, but you need to do that. You need different levels. So one minute I could be taking foster carers old furniture to the tip because they haven't got a car, or looking after a child. The next minute could be looking at some pretty heavy strategies at a charity, whether it's to do with governance or the site we're on, and I've always liked that difference. It was the same in my role actually, like at Lancashire Cricket Club. I could be, at the top end negotiating with Emirates, and we had, probably one of the best achievements in my career was the 10-year naming rights deal with Emirates. I led the negotiations for that, and, dealing with Emirates over in Dubai was pretty heavy stuff. And the next minute I could be going over to see Pat on Great Stone Road, who wanted to complain about the noise from the pop concert we had last week, and sitting with a cup of tea in her house. I absolutely love that, having that difference. It was really a privilege in my career to have that, difference in roles. And for me, again, it's a bit of a cliche, all about people. And whether it's Pat on Great Stone Road or Boutros, great name, who was the key to unlocking all the marketing money at Emirates.
And I imagine that keeps you quite grounded as well, though, because you could get carried away with all that commercial stuff and meeting these big people.
I think a lot of people do, and there's nothing worse than that, really. Absolutely everyone has their own lives to lead, their own challenges, and I've learned some amazing things from some of the most challenged people, whether it be because they live in a deprived area, have no income, or have got mental health needs. But you learn so much from everyone in different ways. It's not just the great leaders in life who you learn from. It's for everyone.
So tell me about the fostering. Do you have figures of how many you fostered, or is there too many to remember? Or
well, we were short-term foster carers initially, so that means after the emergency placement, it's the bridge between that and whatever the long-term decision for the child's future is going to be, which might be long-term foster care, it might be returning to birth parents. So that on average for us was about a year or so, just over a year, because it takes a long time to go through the court cases and everything like that, and legal procedures. And that would be 13 children, almost all of whom we're still in touch with. And one of the key things, people always say, I don't know how you can do it, because you're obviously going to get emotionally bonded, and how can you sort of say goodbye? And absolutely, if I had to say goodbye to every child and didn't see them again, I wouldn't foster, and I'm sure my wife wouldn't either. And it is best practice now to keep connected. It's some of the fostering network, the charity, who look at the overall guidance to best practice in fostering, recommend. But for our very first placement, that wasn't something that was really clear. We were a bit unlucky with different social workers and so on, and we had a bit of a challenge on that. Had I known then what I know now, I would have probably pushed it more. But when you're a foster carer, you don't want to push things too far, because there are many examples of carers who perhaps said a bit too much, and then they find other issues can happen. So it's a very different. It is a professional role, and Stockport are great in terms of having a charter. We're treated as professionals around the table and the team around the child, in most cases. But other parts of the country have huge problems where foster care is not listened to, excluded from meetings and so on. So Stockport actually are one of the better councils when it comes to that. Fostering services.
I agree with that. The view you took there on what it used to be like, because 20 years ago I did me and my wife did some respite foster care, and we felt like it was when they left, and it was it was draining. It was so draining. But it's really nice to hear that you've said that, because I think that's probably one of the things that people, if they were taking a step into doing it, they would think, how much have I got to invest in this? How much am I going to lose?
And it's child dependent. If a child doesn't want to keep in touch for some reason, obviously that wouldn't be the case. We've not found that. Some have moved away. There's a couple of children who live in North Wales, and we probably see them 3 times a year. We go over there, take them out for lunch. We might go if they're in a show, they'll say, Geoff and Nicky, will you come over? It's extended family really, which is lovely.
Nice.
We fostered 2 children who were adopted, and that was a really interesting challenge. One was a 7-day-old baby who we fostered till he was 9 months old. But we've become incredibly close with his adopted parents, and we see him regularly. Comes to stay with us. We've become really close. Now that may be a slightly an exceptional case, really, to be that bonded. But it's whatever's right. The other child we hear, and it's Christmas birthdays. We perhaps haven't seen her for a while. It may not be right for her now, but it may be in 7-8 years' time, 10 years' time, we're the only link with sort of those early years with birth family. So that you just never know what might be the case in the future, which is another reason for the child to keep connected in that way.
They are key years as well, aren't they? Yeah.
But the practice and the guidelines are good. I have one of these sort of natures where I always want to. My wife will tell me, poke your nose into things and be a nuisance. I see it as being a sort of positive, critical friend, and by doing that, I became one of 2 foster carers who sit on the DFE's Fostering Advisory Board, and that's really interesting because you see at the sharp end how policy can be influenced. So we've been looking at various things that affect foster carers. Delegated authority is one, allegations is another. It's a very slow process, but again, I think you have to have a seat at the table in order to influence. And so
when you say DFE, is that Department for Education?
Yeah. So they basically the idea of the Fostering Advisory Board is to help deliver the recommendations in the recent independent children's social care review into policy and practice and maybe legislation. So the wheels turn slowly, but at least the government are listening to so it comprises all the different sector leaders. It might be independent fostering agencies, public as well. You've got Ofsted in there, foster carers, so everyone sort of represented, so that hopefully when government make the final decision and tick the boxes that we've been listened to. So
well advised.
It's only been going for 2 meetings now, but encouraging so far. So
you went from being a foster care, and then things changed a little bit, because I know you're a part of something else now. Yeah,
so our role now is an extended fostering model called Mockingbird. So we are Mockingbird hub carers, and in simple terms, it works on the premise of it takes a village to raise a child. So we have 8 fostering families in what's called a constellation. It's very American because it came from America, so our constellation, and it's all about fidelity of the model. So we should say fidelity, I don't sound better that way. And so you have to run it in a particular way. But the idea is that we provide peer-to-peer support for the foster carers through monthly meetings and also individual meetings. We then do monthly socials where all the kids come as well, so we might go tenpin bowling or go to the park or just come to our house and wreck our house for a few hours. And then that's great because you see the children making friends and relationships. When they're in school, sometimes there's this I'm a child in care, and you get this labelling, but when they're all together, the labels are off and they can just be themselves and talk to each other and discuss things. It's wonderful to see those bonds. And then they'll come to, the children can come to us and stay either for a day or they can stay overnight, have sleepovers, because obviously we're qualified and able to do that and check, where you can't do that often. And it's all about when you're fostering a child, you want to give them the most, in inverted commas, normal experience of normal family life. Because of safeguarding, you can't do everything to make that completely normal. But we do, in the Mockingbird model, it's as normal as it can be, and you know, it's great to see them, and they sort of, it's a bit like being grandparents really. Can we go on to Geoff and Nicky's at the weekend, and you know, we encourage that, and for us now that's working really well. Nicky, I have to say, not unless you listen to this podcast, I won't get any brownie points, but she runs it, she leads it. I just do what I'm told, whether it's take this child here, go and play for a couple of hours, have a kickabout, you know, go up the tip with one of the carers' staff or whatever it might be, but it's fantastic. It's now been rolled out nationally. Stockport, one of the pioneers of it, along with Leeds I think, and it's now been rolled out with some government money nationally, and without doubt in our constellation I think it's supported 2, maybe 3 carers who otherwise might not be fostering, or the placement might have broken down, so
really, yeah.
Evidentially it does work.
It sounds brilliant because it covers both sides. It supports the young people, and it supports the carers as well.
Exactly right.
Which it sounds brilliant, that does. Yeah, and also it finds a place for people like you, because I've only met you last week, and we've been talking today, and I think we've got a similar quality in that we like to fix things, and we like to help, and we like to get hands on, and sometimes these setups can restrict you a little bit because of, like you mentioned, safeguarding, those kind of things. But if there's a bit of freedom in it, the wheels start to turn a bit easier.
Yeah, I think you bang on with that. I think it's a positive and a negative, and you know, I think probably what I've learned, I like to think I've learned that you try and fix things that you've got even a vague chance of fixing, whereas perhaps before it'd be like, I want to try and fix everything, and you just can't do that. So you have to cherry pick a little bit, and that's just sadly so, I just can't do that. It's not the best use of my time. That's probably the smart approach to that, and sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't. But yeah, that's certainly in my nature, where you see, particularly if it's an injustice, it's something really wrong, it you know, it builds up inside you, and you wanna put it right, and I think that's a good passion, a good motivation to have.
Yeah, good. So you're born and bred Stockport?
Born in Heaton, Mersey, but we left when I was 2 to move down to dreaded sort of London and the South East, and then Bournemouth all the way through to my secondary education. And it took me, you know, it was like a homing pigeon instinct to come back, mostly driven by being a mad Manchester City fan, to be honest, as much as Stockport. And eventually working for Cadbury Thai Food, which was my first job after uni, and they gave me a patch up at Nelson and Cole, if you've ever been there.
Yeah, you overshot a little bit there, yeah.
But it was near enough to get to watch City, and then when I got the job at City, after digs in, it'd be West Didsbury, we bought a house in Heaton, Mersey, so I got back to the roots and got married in St John's Church, in Heaton, Mersey, which wasn't because we used to go to the Methodist church. Not that I remember, I was only 2, but that was the link. So yeah, real soft spot with the Heatons, and you know, a lot of. But even though it took a long time for me to get back, I've now been back in Stockport for over 30 years with Cheadle Hulme now.
So 30 years of being in Stockport, you'll see a lot of change. I mean, you've only got to look out the window here in the town centre, and you can see the changes going on at the moment. How do you feel? Do you feel encouraged by that?
Massively encouraged and surprised, really. You know, it's like suddenly when I first heard about the £1 billion infrastructure development, I'm thinking it sounds a bit nuts. Is it really going to happen? And now we're sitting here with the interchange actually open, which I walked through for the first time the other day, and it is massively impressive.
It is fabulous.
And the whole regeneration of the centre of town, I think, is great. I think it's a challenge for Stockport, because what is Stockport? Is it a borough? Is it a town? It's a collection of little villages, and then you get into the Heatons, which is subdivided again into, you know, Heaton, Mersey, Norris, Chapel, Moor, and you know, I think that's the challenge with sort of what is identity compared with the town, where you sort of go into it, there's its centre, and that's it, and you go out again. It's also, you know, is it Manchester when you get to Burnage and the Heatons? It's really tough, but the centre does have a bit of an identity now, and for me, this is probably naive, but I think before that investment, the chance of getting private sector investment was very low, because it looks so run down, and you know, it's not worth me putting my money into it. What I'd like to think is that this investment and the changes you can see acts as a catalyst then for private sector, because let's not be honest, there's still lots and lots of little holes that look awful, and what I hope is we don't stop here, because if we can do the Underbank, which is an amazing place, but there's still lots of little areas that are just boarded up and not so great. So if for me, it's job's not finished, it's a start, but without this start, I think Stockport could have deteriorated into one of the worst 25.
It could have,
rather than one of the best.
It wasn't far off it. It wasn't far off.
So,
and I think this is a wave of momentum, isn't it, that's happened, that's really
I think
exciting.
So, it's encouraging. What's also encouraging is like, suddenly 26-year-old daughter is going into Stockport for a night out rather than going into Manchester. And,
never would have thought of that, would you?
Never would have thought
15 years ago. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So no, I'm massively encouraged by it. I've always been a big fan of Stockport, but I've always had this worry about the identity. What I would say is it still needs one really iconic thing to make it stand out. If you know, in terms of looking at an exterior perspective on what it's Stockport about, I think the reality is, even if you think about when you say where you're from, if you're on holiday, do you say I'm in Stockport? Well, I'm just near Manchester, and you've got all of that. Here's a left field one for you. What if Stockport County could actually become a Premier League side?
Oh wow! Yeah.
Now, I think the club themselves might say, well, our ambitions will be Championship, and even that's challenging. Well, actually, look at the ground and the catchment area. Bournemouth can be a Premier League side, why not Stockport? And that would be transformational. And that's
I think their management there definitely don't have any restrictions in their thoughts about that. I think they're definitely that forward thinking.
I would hope so. I think there's the external and the internal probably thoughts about that. But in terms of how that could impact on the town, as long as you've got that relationship with the council and they understand the benefits of it, which is critical, it could be huge. And that all of a sudden puts Stockport on the map in one fast. That could be done technically in three years. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, let's do it.
So something, and if it's not that, what's it going to be then? The tallest building in the world now, or in the country, sorry, or you come up with something else that's a bit gimmicky. But yeah, that would be great. And having been there at Edgeley Park with the Clark out shouts as we lost 3-1 at Edgeley Park, Manchester City, it would be great to see Manchester City playing Stockport in the Premier League.
Oh, that'd be magic. Yeah, it would be really good. Yeah. So, final question. Yep. The premise of this podcast is based on it's called Casual Collisions, so it's based on that idea of chance meetings that you have in your life, and that's what we try and foster here. Kind of having meeting up face to face where you have something and it changes direction for you. Just give us a couple of examples or one example of when that's happened for you.
Well, the most obvious example, it's probably the case for a lot of us when we meet a long-term or lifelong partner. So I met my wife at Manchester City, so I was working there, and Nikki came in with her dad, who was one of the match ball sponsors, and I thought, I won't say on this podcast that's what I thought, very attractive lady. We went out, it sounds cheesy now, but actually proposed in about 3 years later, proposed in the old boardroom at Main Road, and so City brought us together. So, is that by chance? Who knows? If I wasn't a City supporter, I would have never wanted to work there. I would have never done this. The other chance thing around City was when I was working at Cadbury Typhoon that I alluded to earlier in Bourneville. One of the ladies that worked for me, her husband Ken Ellison, was the groundsman at Olf Church, which is a little non-league side just south of Birmingham, and so she introduced me to him. And he said, I'm a big City fan, and I'm best mates with Stan Gibson, the legendary groundsman at Main Road back in the day. Do you want to come up? So, yeah, that's great. So I went up, met Stan. Stan had his own little turnstile at Main Road, so we could let his mates in. We'd give him a few Cadbury fingers and things like that. In you go, away, and we'd sit. And then after the match, there'd be little Jimmy, who was on the players' lounge, and Cadbury's in you come.
A few more chocolate bars.
Yeah, exactly. Which was great. As a fan, I'm rubbing shoulders with players and all the rest of it. And that set me thinking, well, actually, I've got a commercial operation. I saw and he said, there's the commercial manager, Phil Critchley. So, kind of very long story short, I thought, I've been at Cadbury's 3 years. This is nuts, but I'll write to them, this is me, are you looking for it? And it just happened that they were looking, it was in the very early days of the commercialisation of football, and they said, well, yeah, we are actually looking, so just come for an informal chat. 2 interviews later, met Peter Swales, and once they got the job, it was like a big wage cut, and all the 15 days holiday which you had to take in the close season, didn't matter. Again, a bit like the fostering. If I don't do it, I'll regret it forever. Yeah. Stayed there 14 years and it changed my life. So I think it taught me that there is an element of chance, but then you have to make your own luck and make it happen as well. So
yeah, well, that leads on to my next question: is that how do you make these chance meetings happen? How do you what do you try and manufacture to get?
If I had the perfect answer to that, then I probably wouldn't be sitting here now. I would probably be on well, no, would I be on a yacht somewhere else?
I don't think you'd want
I'd
it,
still
would
be
you?
fostering, wouldn't I? But I think firstly, you try and make it natural. I mean, the worst thing about the business breakfast and the meetings is the manufactured element of it. And if people want to say, oh, really, this is just awful. So I tend to link it to something that may be happening. It might be football. Football's a great, icebreaker, whoever you might support, and start the conversation. I think if it's later on and you thought, well, actually, that person I know, could work well with me. So, you then obviously would make a beeline and you would have that conversation. But otherwise, it's literally just, if it's just chance and you're talking, just talk about something that's might have been some news in the morning. It might be something that's away from that meeting, nothing to do with it. Because no one wants to say, oh, that was a great presentation on creative design or whatever it might be. They don't, if they're being honest. Talk about something that's interesting. The bacon button was a bit cold or whatever. And I think that's a natural thing. And in terms of the first meeting, so the psychologists talked to you about, the impression you make in the first 10 seconds and so on. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. My approach is always trusting. And the same with relationships at work. Trust unless you've got a reason not to. And I think that, you might get your fingers burnt, you might get hurt, it's a price you pay for it. And I've always found that you get an amazing reaction from people. Often people maybe who aren't trusted that often, and it's like, actually, I'm being trusted. So I think trust is a really big thing that's not talked about as much as it should.
Yeah, that's revolutionary thinking, really. Countercultural.
I hope it's not revolutionary. And
well, it's a shame that it is.
Do it,
yeah.
But
I think people do come with a guard, is what I'm saying.
I think, and I suppose it's got harder and harder as time has gone on, because now there is this cautious culture of everything, a compensation culture and so on. So probably trust is an older-fashioned word, but I think when you've worked for a long time and things have worked for you, and also there's a little bit of, do you believe it's the right thing to do? I think there's too much manufactured stuff now. I'm not saying, maybe it's because I don't read enough. I do read, but there's too many leaders who are manufactured based on, I've read this book, read that book, and that works well, and they've re-quoted it on LinkedIn and all the rest.
Yeah.
Be yourself a bit more. I want to see real characters, I want to see real people. That's what makes life exciting. We're all different, and I don't want us all to become too similar in terms of ways. I like that sort of challenge and so on. But there's no absolute right or wrong to it.
Yeah.
And be yourself. And if someone's either going to link with you, at the last but one meeting in Stockport at Edgeley Park, bumped into a guy called Dan Snape who runs a conference, and absolutely nothing. He actually talked to me on this one. We were just coming back from a photo in Edgeley Park. He started talking. Turned out he had an interest in fostering and wanted to talk more about that, and he's ended up supporting our Stockport Foster Care Association events.
Great.
It was a little bit of sponsorship, and but that was literally we just happened. The chance bit was we both happened to walk off the photo at the same time.
Yep.
We might not have bumped into each other, and then you made the most of it. So.
Yeah, you got to get out there, haven't you?
You do.
Great to meet you, Geoff. Thanks for coming down.
You, Rob, enjoyed it. Yeah, thank
Brilliant.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We hope this discussion has ignited a spark within you, an urge to finally have the conversation that you've been putting off, or perhaps the courage to reach out to someone new and explore where that connection may lead. Remember, it's through these connections that collaboration thrives. So don't hesitate to take the first step towards connection. Together, we can forge new paths and unlock endless possibilities.